Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this round laptop forum on the SECBE Awards for Offsite. So, subject matter today is time and cost and quality. That the offsite sector has cracked that already. So, what is next for us? So, I'm Stephen Hunt. I am the CEO of MIG Group. We won this award last year, and are now sponsoring this event and this category and others for this year. We went on to then win Project of the Year and the Sustainability of the Year award in the National Awards. So something from a MIG Group perspective that we are big fans of. We are champions of this event, and in particular the offsite sector, because it represents what MIG Group do, and it represents that we believe there is a much better way of building, and that we can, as an industry, need to start doing something a little bit different. Otherwise, we're going to continue as we always have. So, in terms of the administration of the day, we've got a 45-minute session. We have to be quick, and we have to keep it to 45 minutes. The aim is to share a bit of thought leadership, a bit of inspiration, to hopefully have a bit of conversation and debate around how the offsite sector is going to respond to some new challenges. There is a question and answer functionality, so if anybody wants to put their questions into the chat box, we will try and deal with those towards the end. Time dependent, but feel free to file those questions in as they come. This recording is being made. We are recording the session, and it's available after the session. So, next slide, please. So, who do we have with us today? We have the four finalists, or four of the five finalists in the offsite sector. We have Cormac Lewis, the Operations Director from GBE Group, Norman Hinks, the Managing Director of Masonry Frame Systems, Andrew Shepherd, Managing Director of Top Hat, and Jamie Mason, Commercial Director of Fit Out UK Limited. So, to start the conversation off, it's really a case of just sort of introducing why we're here, really, and why this section of the audience is there. So I think from my perspective, I think ever since I've joined the construction industry, we've recognised the industry needs to change, and we recognise that things are not great. In fact, I actually went back and looked earlier today that it was 22 years ago I wrote a dissertation for my degree on collaboration in the industry, and well, it's fair to say many of those lessons have never been adapted. In more recent times, we've had a greater focus of energy and enthusiasm towards the offsite agenda, and MMC moving rapidly up people's interest list across all facets of our industry. For those of us on this panel, looking for a better way of doing things has become normal. It's normal for us. And the submissions that the teams have made and the shortlisted candidates here prove that we can deliver in a smarter way. However, we can't stand still. Advancements in technology that impact our lives moves at a ferocious pace. And as it's been put by others, we need to modernise or die. So the last few years have brought together a few events that are probably largely foreseen, but have accelerated both the desire and the need to change. A catastrophic fire, a climate emergency, economic upheaval in Brexit, a pandemic, and now massive inflationary pressures, all forcing the industry to find a better way of doing things. So the world of MMC has already dealt with proving that we can do things better. So the heart of today's conversation really is about how we deal with what comes next. So the question that we are looking to talk about and debate today is really based around how the industry responds to the future. So time, quality and cost has been the challenge of the industry for forever. It was always the rhetoric that you couldn't have all three. I think what the offsite industry has proven, actually, you can go some way, and if not all the way, to achieving those. However, in response to those challenges that we've had over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, there are now new challenges on the horizon that potentially replace and become the new opposing forces. Zero carbon, obviously a massive challenge for the industry, if not the planet. The flexibility of use, one of the things that we are now seeing from an industry pressure is that people interact and want to use their buildings in a different way. And obviously, fire safety has become a huge part of our world. So, panelists with us today represent some of the companies that are leading the charge in Offsite in London and the South East. And one of the things we want to try and do now is share some of the benefit of traditional methods, or the benefits of Offsite over traditional, and how we create a positive impact around those three challenges. So, to open up the conversation, I thought we'd start by looking at design flair and design flexibility. Apologies, actually, what I should have done to start with is raise the panel question. So there is a poll question. So there we go, poll question. So there's 3 questions to answer, which we will visit as we go through this conversation. First one, does the audience think that Offsite can deliver a zero carbon response? Looks like I've got a vote as well, haven't I? Can Offsite deliver a design flair and flexibility, so a flexible response to design? And can Offsite address the fire issues as raised in the Hackett reports? There you go, a massive positive towards the view of Offsite construction. So let's start by then having a look at some of the subjects that portrays. So, as I said, we'll start with having a look at the design flair and flexibility, and how the world has changed and how things have interested. So, the piece I wanted to look at, and I was going to send this towards you, Jamie, in terms of how you've seen your market sector, how the interaction of the end user there has started to impact the work that you do.
Well, the end user being what, the retailer or the customer? I guess it's a retailer.
Customers driving change.
Yeah, I guess you are. Yeah, I mean, our submission is probably slightly different than everyone else's in that, we're a fit-out contractor. So what we kind of, our kind of subject was, refitting toilets, believe it or not. But we were tasked with refitting, 725 toilets across the UK for Tesco. And because they're all different sizes and shapes, designing, cubicles and vanity units and wall panels, etc., for 725 different toilets would be a massive challenge. So what we tried to do was standardise the design, and therefore, that kind of, helped us. It gave us flexibility because some cubicles, for example, were 1.1 meter wide and some were 1.2 meter wide. But because we did these surveys, it gave us flexibility to kind of adjust using our 3D design technology, and so they were flexible there. But also because our kind of a construction model, we're a kind of self-delivery company, so we've got in-house design. We've got 10 CAD operators here, and then we've got a manufacturing facility here at Port Royal, and then we've got install teams. So we had that kind of full circle kind of control over the whole process, and therefore we had the flexibility to amend design as and when we saw fit from site surveys and stuff like that. You see what I mean? And we weren't waiting 6 weeks for an architect to get back to us, or an approval from a structural engineer. That whole kind of design process, manufacturing process, and installation process was all part of the same circle. And so therefore, that gave us that flexibility. In terms of flair, there's not much flair in the designing toilets, I'm afraid. It was basically mass production. It was hygienic wall panels. It was solid surface tops. It was compact board cubicles and ceramic tiles. So there wasn't much flair there, but flexibility certainly. But because we had control of the whole kind of construction process, you could be flexible because making changes didn't have a massive impact upon program because you're in control of those that process. Does that make sense?
It does. And have you seen, obviously your submission is related to Tesco's, but have you seen
Yes.
a demand or a change in requirements from the supermarket shoppers? Is there have Tesco?
Pre and post pandemic, definitely. I mean, all the toilets we installed had touchless taps, so there's no kind of you're not touching the taps to turn them on. They've got sensors. All the walls, instead of having wallpaper or tiles, hygienic, easy wipe, wall panels. All handrails were taken out, so to spread the spread of the virus. Airflow changes and air venting was increased. So all that was definitely changed. In the installation of the toilets, since 2 years ago, it's complete kind of opposite. A massive drive towards a cleaner environment for the customers. Even our site welfare facilities, usually we're asked to use the kind of the staff toilets, but we had to commandeer site welfare facilities, mobile ones, so that we could use our own site welfare facilities and not share those with the store. So that changed things. And then also phasing. Offsite kind of construction allowed us to kind of prefabricate the cubicles, the doors, the vanity units, etc. But also we had to phase our works so that instead of doing a 12-hour shift, we're doing 2 8-hour shifts. Less people on site, so therefore less kind of exposure to less people on site, less exposure to the virus, I guess. And also off-site construction led to a 50% reduction in program, and therefore less operatives on site, less time spent on site, and it kind of really drove us to think about different things, and traditional construction methods were questioned. And when we thought about it, off-site construction, it does drive quality, it drives speed, and it does drive cost down as well. It standardizes component parts. So, it's a real benefit to us and to Tesco. And it did change the way they kind of approach subjects, definitely.
So I think as an industry, what we've seen is that the commercial office market in particular is undergoing an identity sort of crisis, in the sense it's now establishing what it wants to do. What other sectors do you think? So I was going to pose this one to you, Andrew, in terms of the residential sector. What changes are you seeing? End users, developer requirements for our industry to respond to?
Well, I'm just going to pick up something Jamie said. I mean, one of the questions you ask is does Offsite deliver good quality design? And for me, it enables great quality design, but you actually focus on getting the maximum bang for your buck. Having very billingy toilets, shall we say, isn't necessarily hugely valuable in terms of what you do. But actually, if you spend your money, and again, this is one of the areas where we're finding it in the housing market, in the housing sector, a lot of drive for ultra low carbon housing now. Looking at delivering zero embodied carbon, houses that are really, really low carbon in operation, and also addressing fuel poverty by delivering houses that are cheap to run and easy to run and maintain. So we're definitely seeing a shift there, more pressure. And I think that's partly because you're seeing new entrants into those markets. A lot of institutional investors are now into the housing market. Build to rent seems to be a huge sector now that's suddenly come out of nowhere, growing exponentially, billions of pounds chasing into that sector. And they are governed by European rules and regulations in terms of ESG and sustainability. And so they're looking for higher sustainability on those projects. So if you're able to deliver that, absolutely you can using Offsite, then you're at the front of the queue.
I'll come back. Norman's got his hand up, so I was.
Thank you, Stephen. I think Andrew's just summed up a lot of what I'd like to want to add, actually, in that respect. I think and we have this conversation with a number of architects and designers out there. I think we have to look at the current model, actually, and architects table some, really quite innovative design in the very and with an awful lot of flair. And then by the time it gets in the hands of the contractor and the PQS, so all of that flair is actually sort of designed out, and we engineer it, or we value engineer it, so we say, and we end up with something that ordinarily doesn't wholly represent what the architects started with, actually, in that respect. And I think if we, I think this is where Offsite and we bring forward we promote a platform approach, a PDFMA platform approach in that respect, where we have a pretty standardized industrialized sort of process in that respect that underpins everything that we actually do. And we get that right. We get our cost base right, and then that leaves the architect the freedom to actually, dress it up and deliver closer to what their original concept was, actually, in that respect. I've got one, picking up on where Jamie was. I've got one scenario here that we were talking to one of the largest housing associations in the UK, actually in Europe, in that respect. They build over 10,000 units a year in that respect. And when they actually analysed all of their works, in that 10,000 units, they were building something like 450 different bathroom types. Now, it begs the question, how can you ever get 450 bathroom types in 10,000 units? And do you really need 450 bathroom types is the question. I think if we spend our money and we rationalise some of these processes, actually, in that respect, we will actually have more money to deliver the flair and the innovation and the flexibility that invariably clients and architects and the design team are actually looking for.
No, I think you're 100% correct, and it sort of leads on to another question here. But so, Cormac, I was going to come to you for the next question anyway. But since you've got your hand up, did you want to?
Yeah, it was just, I think we're all going to agree. Even though we all build different things around this screen, and we build large M&E, like multiple service plant rooms, etc., for like central London buildings, right? But I think we all will agree that early engagement in the design is what's key throughout all of this, because everyone's saying, when we get involved, we have to change this. There's so many types of bathroom types. If we find when we are engaged through a PCSA or through a much earlier process than a traditional construction contract, we have the time to influence the design and change it from 400 types to 10 types.
Yes,
you've got typicality, and you've got repeatability, and you get the value of a mass scale. When you look for like design flair, we can only bring that when we get the opportunity to be engaged at a much earlier stage. We find that the developers that see the benefits to Offsite are engaging with our business at stage 3 or stage 4, as opposed to 4A. We want prefab, and you say, well, I can only do a limited amount with this design. However, if we get engaged at this stage and work with the consultant and the architect, we can manipulate the overall design to have a fantastic prefabrication strategy that takes hundreds of thousands of man hours off-site and reduces the carbon impact, etc., etc. So in regards to design flair, it is it's incumbent on the developers and the architects to start engaging with all of us at an earlier stage and use our skills. So yeah.
Just on that point, it's like you guys can second guess the questions as they come. One of the questions for the panel today was, well, we all recognise that to do offsite, do modern methods of construction well, early engagement is a must. So what is it that's missing? What are the tools that we want to see the industry adapt or adopt even to allow us to have these intelligent conversations at the right point in the journey?
I mean, for me, it's about proving that collaboration at stage 3 works. Okay, everyone's a little bit protective of their part of the pie, and for the contractor to engage with the consultant at stage 3, they get a little bit weary that we're going to come in and change the design. But it's about working with them. We are very good at building plant rooms, and the guys around this screen are very good at what they do. So we find, no offense to consultants, but there's times that they'll fully model a plant room and we get that and put it in the bin and start again. Okay, so the client has wasted a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of the procurement time. So I suppose the more aware developers are getting us to take a very rough design and allowing us to come up with maybe a better idea, because typically when we modularize a plant room, we save 20 or 30% of the space that the consultant may have generated for maintenance and other reasons. And we create value because we might suggest more modern products. So it's about consultants understanding that there's not a game to be played here. We're all trying to do the same. We're all trying to create an exceptional project, but it's a mindset change, I think, and it is happening. It's just it's not happening everywhere, and it's happening a bit too slow for the industry to take on, I think.
But I think it's an educational piece that's, it's still a lot of journey to be taken.
It goes back to your dissertation, Stephen, about partnerships, doesn't it? Because you know, you need to partnership early on, don't you? And you know, consultants and designers, you know, if you take a subcontractor on board too early, you know, it's investment in a subcontractor. It's working with those subcontractors, engaging with them, and not tendering. It's partnering with them so that you are, you know, doing design together rather than, you know, doing it for commercial reasons. And cost drives it a lot of the time, doesn't it? You know, we've got to tender it because we've got to make that 10% saving on that package, and that's the issue. Is I think you've got a partnership with the design team and the construction team, so you've got, you know, a single goal to drive at rather than just cost.
Okay. I mean, when we look at it, when we've done case studies on projects we've delivered, when we have the early engagement, we typically do save value over the project, but it's very difficult to illustrate that day one. Okay, we can do that on a time-based study. We can do that on how many men we take off site. We can do that on saved resource, but it's very difficult to quantify that and put it on the table. So it's about their trust in us and seeing how, you know, if you've delivered a number of projects with a certain client, they see that the model works, so they will engage with you early. But for new clients, it's difficult to prove that day one.
If I could just come in for a second there. You know, I think MMC and Offsite is still very much in its infancy, and I would say probably pre-pandemic, the traction was slow. Brexit certainly didn't help in that manner. But post-pandemic here now, I think there is there's a variety of different drivers going on, as Stephen mentioned in his opening address. But we're now trying to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I think probably the biggest issue that clients have right now, there's no universal method of measurement actually, or definition that can single one or other out. And there's a number of players that are starting to emerge as MMC consultants and the like that have got an awareness of all of those. But it is difficult for clients right now, difficult for developers, because a lot of the methods that we're bringing to market are still in their infancy and still untried, actually, in that respect. And until we've got some comparators there, it's very difficult for them to make those informed decisions. But it is happening, and it's happening at a fast rate of knots, actually, right now. And probably if we had this conversation in 12 months' time, we might be talking about other things, actually, in that respect. But
to move the conversation on a little bit, and it's sort of useful segue. So there's been a question raised by one of the audience. Simon Cash has asked a question about offsite construction providing consistent terms of quality. But his question is about the design life and the reuse. So it sort of links into a question about how design and the offsite sector starts to deal with sustainability, carbon response, etc. So obviously, one of the key success factors to delivering sustainability is reuse, it's repurposing, it's making sure that things have a lifespan that provides that longevity. So, I mean, the prime example is if you look at sort of the residential market, Victorian housing stock has been in existence for 140 years. It's still incredibly relevant. It's still incredibly well sought after, and it's lasted for 140 years. So with reuse and repurposing being that key success, how do we ensure that what we are building now has inherently in it that quality of design and that generates the future legacy?
I mean, what we're looking at, because a lot of our clients now are pushing the carbon subject, okay, embodied carbon, operational carbon, etc. So what we're looking at, because we look at it in three kind of areas that we as in the contractor could influence, and that's like design, build, and operation. And in the design elements, we get a design from a consultant, but because we're building a modular system, we're looking at it that we challenge that design to reduce the capital carbon initially, and look at it as a modular build, so you can add to it after you after you put a plant room in, that you can add to it in the future if things change, but not design it for the temperature in 20 years' time, because then you got a load of capital plants sitting there that's not doing anything, and you got to maintain and you got to buy it. So it's a lot of capital expenditure up front for a situation that doesn't occur yet. So we are looking at building modular plant rooms so that you can build one for the current situation, but also add to it in 5 years' time if things change. And that, in a nutshell, what that does is reduces the upfront embodied carbon. And that's a subject that people are grabbing hold of now. 5 years ago, it was just, lip service. Now it's a criteria that developers are judging us on. So that's the angle that we're looking at now, is to be able to add to a design, as opposed to try and design something now for what it is in 20 years. Design in the resiliency and design it into the infrastructure. Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, Andrew, Norman, was very different products. You've both got product-led responses to it. How are you sort of dealing with, longevity of life? And again, the question that's just come in onto the chat function there is about refurbishment and reuse. So how are we ensuring that, all right, very different products, that both of your products are able to respond to those challenges?
Andrew, I don't know whether you want to take it first or let me go. But right. Okay. Our business is very much focused on new build. I very much appreciate Victorian housing and reusing existing stock in that respect, but we have a fundamental housing shortage, and our focus is very much about delivering more, quicker, better, and safer, and most importantly, more sustainable in that respect. Sustainability is such a broad subject. I don't think we could discuss all of that in the 45 minutes that we've got this afternoon. We are very much looking at how we can address carbon neutrality and zero carbon. Our focus for the last 10 years has very much been on addressing operational carbon neutrality. Now it's very much shifted to the embodied carbon, actually, in that respect. I think it was Mark Farmer, I think, put a quote out just very, very recently, which we actually use. We use ourselves. All waste has some form of embodied carbon. And if we can reduce or eliminate waste, then we will cut our carbon emissions at a stroke. Now, this is where Offsite, I think, plays a significant part. We all come from a traditional background, I presume. I've been trying to address waste on a construction site for the last 35 years and really haven't made a great deal of impact on it. Now I can say in our format that we have, we're actually addressing, we can quote that we are addressing waste at source, and we are quoting now that we have zero waste to landfill. Now that's an enormous stride forward for otherwise an industry that's still building the same way as we were in the dark ages, quite honestly. Now, our focus now, having addressed the waste in construction, in use in that respect, is now looking at how our manufacturers can deliver that waste. Deliver the product and reduce their waste actually in manufacture. And that there's not a manufacturer out there today that has got every answer to all of that, and I think it's an evolutionary process that we're going to be going through over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it takes our industry captains and the leaders of our country in that respect to actually put this on the agenda, which we've seen in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, and now we're all responding to it.
We'll loop back to the embodied carbon stuff in a minute.
Okay,
sure.
There was Andrew was going to answer the same question in terms of reusability.
One of my favourite bits of sport is always asking the board of big house builders whether or not they live in one of their own houses that they've built through their business, and the answer is seldom no. Yes, sorry. It's and you ask the question, why not? And you're like, where do you live? Oh, I live in a Georgian house or a Victorian house or something like that. And actually, what they're saying is they're living in houses that have a better design quality, and those houses that have better design quality are potentially those houses that have longevity. We talk about houses from the 1930s being quite aesthetically pleasing, but houses from 1919, Home for Heroes, a number of those are now being demolished because they weren't aesthetically pleasing. Quality has been up and down, and there are Victorian homes that are built fantastically, and there are Victorian homes that are not so great. So actually, what's the longevity there is almost that design quality. A second part for me is actually then looking at the build quality, because if the design quality is good, but actually it should be well built, and people will make the effort to invest in it and continue using that building over a long period of time. So I think design quality is incredibly important in all of this. And I'm the manufacturer contractor, and I'm saying I think it's really, really important that we build homes that are aesthetically pleasing and people actually desire and want to live in. Because if we keep on churning out rubbish housing, we're just creating another problem for another 50 years' time, is my view.
Yes, I wholly agree. Yeah,
and I think generally, one of the challenges that we do need to address as a response to that is that if you take the Victorian house, what have a lot of people done to those houses? They've changed the way they use those properties. So a lot of people have knocked the backs out of them, put on an extension, some bifold doors and some roof lights, and really changed how that space is used. I think for me, one of the key success factors, therefore, of what we build today is about how it gets reused and how it can be redesigned. Those component parts need to be able to respond to those changes. And I sort of leave as a bit of an open question. Cormac touched on it by having spare capacity in space or plug and play expansion. But in other areas, how are we going to respond to not just design quality, but design flexibility? Can we create open plan living in the structures we're building today? Will we be filling all those structures back in again and creating little rooms? But who wants to go? So it's the flexibility in that current response.
Well, I can only answer that when it comes to plant rooms, really, because that's what we are focusing on. So we do build residential apartments and whatnot, but we kind of our big focus is on major plant space, and as I said before, we can modularize that to add to it. But as opposed to changing the interior of houses, I'll have to ask the rest of the lads there.
Stephen, I'll pick up on a bit of that, and I'll refer back to the opening statement that I made there. But I think this is an issue for the industry as a whole, not just the offsite sector here. These are client-led decisions, developer-led decisions, actually, in that respect. But if we can start to reduce cost, eliminate waste, build better using offsite or using a platform type approach, then it enables it puts money or leaves money back in the budget for our clients to actually maintain a more flexible design or a flexible space that can be used for future need. Actually, in that regards, I think. For decades now, everything has been wholly cost driven. It probably will still be cost driven in that respect. We've got a number of issues here. Building affordable homes, and that is that's difficult in its own right. We've got a society that's struggling to afford those houses. So, cost will play its part, and we have to recognise that. Brilliant Victorian and Georgian housing in that respect, but there's very few people that can afford the 1.2 million in Kensington that might need to purchase some of those beautiful houses in that respect. And it's how can we build? We need to bring this back to how can we build more cost effectively, better design, and better quality. Quality, without a shadow of a doubt. Design might be one thing, but I challenge most of the major builders out there for quality. Quite honestly, their defects ratings are pretty atrocious. Their customer care ratings are pretty awful too. And I think this is where Offsite can significantly play its part. We're bringing engineered solutions to market here that are manufactured in a factory, in factory controlled conditions, in one form or another. All five of us are all developing things on a similar theme. When that comes to site, right, we're not now dependent. We're not relying now on guys out in the field in all weathers trying to put this together. And that's how we can start to move. I don't think there is any utopia, and I don't think there is any one size fits all actually in all of this. But we have to start somewhere, and I think there is gravitas there. I think there is traction now there in that market, and I think it will grow. Actually, it is growing without a shadow of a doubt.
So sort of moving the conversation on as we have a limited time. So we started to talk there about carbon, and I think one of the things that's fair to say that operational carbon generated by the buildings that we build is an easier subject to tackle than the embodied carbon. Offsite sector goes a long way, as you've mentioned, because the wastage is less, the amount of material that is used, the man hours, etc., are all lower. But how are we seeing the industry start to respond to products, to generating new product, to having a better response to materials that are not carbon heavy?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, the big thing we saw, especially through COVID as well, was we've been doing Offsite for 20 years as a business, and the big advantage through COVID was you consolidate a lot of your deliveries. When you are making a prefabricated module, all of the deliveries go to one place, and you've got one delivery to central London. So, when London was in lockdown, it was difficult to get things in and out of site. It was that capability to consolidate, through the Offsite process has been a huge advantage. And I think clients have witnessed that and are taking that on board and can see the advantage to only having, 3 or 4 deliveries a week as opposed to having 40 or 50 deliveries a week of major kit, and then having to get rid of the waste that associated with that. So we've seen a huge, uplift since the pandemic in the interest of the Offsite products that we make. We found that in some ways the pandemic has been, an accelerator as opposed to a disruptor. So it's been a good that there's been an interest in what the advantages of that Offsite product can give to building sites in central London, where it's difficult to deliver to and difficult to access.
Yeah, but I think those decisions are also based on cost, aren't they? You go central London is a great example where consolidation is a great benefit, but the problem we've got is that these these products with less carbon in them are more expensive, and until they're on the same par as a sheet of plywood, clients are always going to choose unfortunately the most cost effective solution, unless the government put in legislation to kind of drive clients and developers to choose more carbon friendly products, and that's the issue. I think it needs to be driven from the top, because you see the price of construction materials is going through the roof at the moment, and so it's very difficult for clients to choose the most expensive option when there's budgets to kind of to meet and stuff like that. So it's got to be led by the government. It's got to be.
Yeah, I think, and sort of linking the conversation together. So one of the challenges that the industry is now dealing with is the conflict between the regulations for fire and the want to make buildings perform better under fire. But those materials are the ones that aren't necessarily as carbon friendly as the others. So I guess the question, I'll point it towards you, Andrew, in this one, is that how are we seeing some of the response? Yeah, how do we deal with having flammable materials in our buildings and fire regulation? How are you seeing it respond?
There's a really interesting article on Newsnight a couple of nights ago. I had Dame Judith Hackett talking, and she stated that she thought there'd been an overreaction to what she said regarding fire and fire regulations in Part B. And it was quite interesting to see that, because what she's saying is, we need to get the balance right. We need to understand that some of these, we need to look at some innovative new products and new products generally that certainly suppress fire and are not adding to the load. But we need to balance that with, is it really a big issue in a 3-story building where we're seeing, lenders asking for an EWS form, which is just madness. Or even the regulations change in London where the mayor's insisted that anything, any property, any residential development, whatever height, has to have a completely Class A1 facade, even if it's a bungalow. That seems an extreme response to it. So I think over time we'll find some balance. I don't think it's going to happen quickly because people are still rightly nervous, and we need to find that balance. So I suspect that's going to be one of those things we find over time.
Okay, we are starting to run short of time. We only have a couple of minutes left. So I was just checking. There's a question coming there from Clive on the chat function there. What if we think of living accommodation like a Nike shoe? All feet are similar. So can Offsite trial a utility efficient skeleton which can have a renewable change clothing, i.e. an outer shell? Any thoughts there, anybody? Not the easiest questions to read.
I think that's a fair statement. There are certain things in all buildings that are common. All buildings have walls and floors. We reinvent columns or walls every time we design a building. We go to scratch. We ask the structural engineer to design something. Whereas I can guarantee you, that structural engineer has probably got something in the background that works. It's probably the same in the MVP world as well. We always start from scratch. I don't think we should start from scratch. I think we should actually start from the basis of, right, this is an intelligent place to start. Here's some componentry that we know works. We do volumetric, but if we're looking at schools or office, looking at panelized, looking at precast, looking at all sorts of different solutions and working out what's best and using that as your starting point rather than starting from first principles.
Andrew, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we build commercial buildings, hotels, resi, and fundamentally the shell and core is the same in a lot of them. And we get a different design for each one. And we've now got a library of modules that will fit that design, but it's very frustrating having to kind of start, from scratch every time. I think it's because the industry moves on, products move on, new products come out. So you got to look at the design again. Our heating and cooling is now on air source heat pumps, and it used to be boilers and chillers. So that's a different design. But I couldn't agree more. I think that, if you look at buildings and they're all similar, why not have a similar type system that you can plug and play and have repeatability that's going to be much more common.
So final quick comment, Jamie, I was going to direct that one towards you, which is obviously the sector that you work in. Presumably you see a lot of this common product and reuse of design.
Yes, we do. I mean, reuse is obviously quite a major part now in terms of fit out only. We're not doing many new builds, but all your supermarket shelves where you see your baked beans kind of stored on, any refurb shop, we take all that out now, and we've got to remanufacture it, respray it, repowder coat it, etc. And that goes back into stores, and we save about, it's literally about £1 million a year across the kind of the retail estate, putting reuse kit in. And the drive for that, is really on the agenda now with supermarkets, banging the net zero drum. And so reuse fitting out is definitely something that we're seeing an increase on. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, I think that is pretty much us out of time. So it only really leaves me to do one thing, which is to thank all the panelists for joining us this afternoon. Obviously, then to wish them all the best of luck, because they find out whether they were successful in winning this category at somewhere between 5 and 6 this evening. There is a link for everybody to join in, and we'll see who the successful parties were. So, thank you very much.